They told me you can't go home again. They were wrong. You can go back, but you won't recognize what's left. My name is Elena Cross. And 11 years ago, I swore I'd never set foot in my hometown again. But life has a way of pulling you back. Not for nostalgia, not for love, but for unfinished business. Subscribe now and share your thoughts in the comments, because every story of justice deserves a voice. It started with a phone call, a soft, fragile voice. Elena, my grandmother said, your father's memorial is Saturday. Then, after a pause that felt like a warning, she added, you should come home. There are things you need to see with your own eyes. I almost said no. I almost hung up. But curiosity is a dangerous thing when mixed with old wounds. So I packed 2 suitcases, one with clothes and one filled with legal documents that had followed me for a decade. Documents my mother thought I'd forgotten. The flight from New York to Asheville took 2 hours. 2 hours to remember everything I'd buried. 2 hours to prepare my face to look calm, even when my hands were shaking. When I drove through town, it felt smaller than memory. The houses, the trees, the old high school that once felt like a prison. Even the air felt thinner, like it had been holding its breath all these years. And there it was. 125 Willow Street, the house my father built with his bare hands. The one with the wraparound porch, white siding, and a mailbox that used to read Cross. Now it said Holloway, my mother's new husband's name, Mark Holloway. The man who replaced my father's laughter with silence. The man who took a widow's loneliness and called it love. The moment I stepped out of the car, the air changed. The windows were dark, curtains drawn tight. The garden my father planted was gone, replaced by gravel. The basketball hoop he'd hung for my 16th birthday vanished. And somehow even the old oak tree seemed smaller. I stood there for a moment, my hand on the gate, and I whispered to no one, Dad, I'm home. But it doesn't feel like it. The door opened before I could knock. Elena, my mother said, her smile trembling. She looked smaller too. Tired eyes, brittle voice, that kind of exhaustion you can't fix with sleep. Then came Mark. He leaned in the doorway like a man who thought he owned the ground under everyone's feet. Well, he said, grinning, look who remembered she has a mother. His voice was slick. Bourbon slick. The kind that makes you want to leave a room even before you walk in. I said nothing, just nodded, polite, detached, and walked inside. The smell hit me first, cigarettes and cheap whiskey. The photos of our family were gone, replaced by Mark's hunting trophies and a massive TV that looked like it had eaten the living room. The walls that once held laughter, now held silence and smoke. My mother fluttered between us, like she always did, trying to fill the cracks. Mark, be nice, she said softly. He chuckled. I'm always nice. He wasn't. My old room? Gone. It was now his office, walls covered with fishing posters and beer logos. My bed had been replaced by a fold-out couch in the storage room. Boxes labeled Mark's Tools stacked high where my childhood had once been. I forced a smile. This'll do, I said. Mom looked relieved. Mark smirked. And I knew I'd made a mistake. Dinner was awkward. Mark dominated the table like a man giving a sermon to people who stopped believing years ago. He asked about my life in New York, not because he cared, but because he wanted to find something to mock. You corporate types, he said, sipping his drink, think you're better than real working people. I said quietly, we just work differently. He laughed, too loud, too long. You hear that, Lydia? She's too good for us now. My mother said nothing, just stared at her plate. That silence told me everything. She'd been living in this storm for years. That night I lay on the pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to their muffled voices upstairs. Her apologizing for things that weren't her fault. Him shouting, pacing, slamming doors. I opened my phone. The secure folder was still there. Property papers, mortgage agreements, my father's signature, my own. From when I'd co-signed at 19 to help my mom refinance after Dad's death. And right there, in fine print, was what Mark had never read. A clause, written by me, stating that no ownership transfer could occur without my consent. I'd added it out of instinct, because my father had taught me something important before he died. Never sign something you don't understand, and always keep your own copy. My hand trembled, holding the phone, because that clause meant something simple. This house, my father's house, wasn't theirs to sell, not to transfer, not to gamble away, not even to Mark. And that meant I had power. But first, I needed proof. So I waited. The next morning, my mother knocked on the door. "You should stay a few days," she said softly. "We can talk." "Sure," I said. "We'll talk." But my mind was already working. That evening, Mark came home drunk again. The house stank of his anger. He cornered me in the hallway. "Thought you'd just waltz in here and take control again, huh?" He sneered. "I don't want control," I said calmly. "Just respect." "Respect?" He laughed. "You're a guest in my house, sweetheart. Don't forget that." When his hand hit my face, I didn't flinch this time. I just looked him dead in the eye, and I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. But because that moment gave me exactly what I needed. Evidence. I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, took a photo of the bruise under harsh yellow light, saved it, time-stamped it, then sent one message. To Jonathan Pierce, attorney. Subject: urgent, property, assault, family, need counsel. I hit send and whispered to my reflection, "You picked the wrong daughter, Mark." The next morning, I left for my grandmother's house. For once, the air there didn't feel heavy. She made tea, set the cup down, and said, "Your father always said you were the one who'd stand your ground." I smiled faintly. He taught me well. She slid an envelope across the table. "Then use this. You'll need it inside. Old deeds, original mortgage records, and letters my father had written before he died. The proof I'd need." By the time I drove back to Willow Street that night, I knew two things. Mark Holloway had no idea how deep this was about to go, and I was done playing nice. Because justice doesn't always come in uniforms or badges. Sometimes it comes in perfectly signed paperwork. You ever notice how silence can be louder than shouting? The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Mom avoided me. Mark was gone, probably nursing a hangover at his favorite bar. The Rusty Spur. The kind of place where broken men pretended to be legends. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, papers spread out like a war map. Deed transfers, mortgage renewals, everything my mother had signed. But one signature, hers, didn't match. The slant was wrong, the loops too tight. It looked forged. I sent a photo of it to Jonathan Pierce, my attorney in Manhattan. He replied within minutes. "You're not imagining things, Elena. That's fraud. And if your name's still on the deed, it's also theft." The words made my pulse quicken. Fraud, theft, criminal acts. Not just bad choices. For the first time in 11 years, I felt something powerful rising in my chest. Not anger. Control. I was going to take back everything they thought they'd buried. At noon, I met Grandma at her lawyer's office, Jonathan Morrison, her old friend. He was in his 60s, sharp eyes behind silver glasses. He studied the papers like a surgeon studying X-rays. "Elena," he said finally, "your stepfather is sitting on a pile of violations. Forgery, asset concealment, possibly elder abuse?" I nodded. "Can we prove it?" He smiled slightly. "We don't need to prove it yet. We just need to make him think we can." That was the first time I saw how power really works. Not in screaming, not in violence, but in knowledge. We spent the afternoon building the timeline, the transfers, the loans, the forged forms. When I left, I had a folder thick enough to crush a lie, and I intended to. That evening, I drove back to Willow Street. Mark's truck was in the driveway. My pulse spiked, but I didn't stop. Inside, Mom was in the kitchen, pretending to read a magazine. Mark sat at the table, beer in hand, face already flushed. He grinned when he saw me. "Well, look who's back. The prodigal daughter." "Nice to see you sober this time," I said evenly. His smile faltered. "What did you just say?" "You heard me?" He slammed his beer on the table. "You think you can come in here with your fancy job and your attitude?" I cut him off. "Actually, I came with something else." I dropped the folder onto the table. The sound made my mother flinch. "What's that?" Mark asked. "Proof," I said simply, "that this house isn't yours. That every loan you forged, every signature you faked, it's all about to come undone." His laugh was ugly. "You think some papers scare me?" I smiled. "No. The sheriff he froze." For the first time, I saw fear. Just a flicker. But it was there. "Get out," he growled. I leaned closer. "You'll need to do better than that, Mark. I'm not 18 anymore. You can't shout me out of this house." Mom whispered my name. "Elena, please." But I wasn't backing down. Not anymore. I looked at her. "Mom, when was the last time you actually saw the mortgage statement?" She frowned. "Mark handles that." "Exactly," I said. "You're 3 months behind. He's been taking out loans in your name, cashing your insurance, draining your account." She went pale. Mark stood up fast, chair scraping hard against the tile. "Enough," he barked. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I do," I said softly. "And so will the judge." He lunged toward me, hand raised, but I didn't move, didn't even blink. Because this time I had my phone out. Recording. Documenting every second. "Do it," I whispered. "Hit me again. Give the DA a reason to file the assault charges." His hand trembled midair, then dropped. I smiled. That's what I thought. I turned to my mother. "You can come with me, or you can stay here. But tomorrow morning I'm filing everything, and this house goes under court protection." She just stood there, tears in her eyes, voice small. "Elena, I don't know what to do." "Yes," I said quietly. "You do. You just have to choose." Then I walked out, calm, deliberate, and didn't look back. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my hotel room, staring at the bruise in the mirror, faint now but still visible. It wasn't just pain, it was evidence. My phone buzzed. A text from Morrison. "We're ready to move. County courthouse opens at 8. At 8:05, we filed the emergency injunction. By 9:30, a judge signed the order freezing all property transfers. By noon, the sheriff's department confirmed they'd deliver the notice. Mark Holloway had officially lost control of everything he thought he owned, and I didn't even need to raise my voice. When we arrived back at the house with the sheriff, the neighbors were already peeking through their curtains. Asheville loved gossip, and this was better than daytime TV. Mark stormed out onto the porch shouting, "You can't do this. This is my house." The sheriff handed him the order. "Not according to the county, sir." Mark snatched the papers, eyes darting over the words he couldn't fully read. You tricked her," he spat, pointing at me. "You manipulated your mother." I folded my arms. I protected my father's house. "You think you're better than me?" "I don't have to think it, Mark." The sheriff cleared his throat. "That'll do, both of you." Then to me, "Miss Cross, you're free to secure the property. We'll make sure things stay peaceful." Peaceful. Funny word, after so much chaos. Inside, the house felt different already, like it knew who was back in charge. I walked through the rooms with my phone camera, documenting everything. The damaged floors, the cigarette burns, the empty spaces where family photos had been. In Mark's office, I found something better than closure. Receipts, pawn slips, consignment papers. He'd sold my father's belongings piece by piece, his tools, his medals, his watch, and he kept the proof, probably for tax write-offs. Morrison whistled. He just handed us our case. I smiled, slow and sharp. Let him keep talking. He's building it for us. The sheriff's deputy stepped in. Ma'am, you're all set. We'll post the notice outside. If he removes anything, he's in violation of a court order. Thank you, I said, then turned to Mark. Guess you'll have to find somewhere else to drink tonight. He sneered. This isn't over. No, I said softly. It's just beginning. That night, I sat at Grandma's again, the folder thicker now, heavier with proof. Mom hadn't called, didn't text, but I knew she was thinking about everything. Morrison poured us both tea. You know, he said, most people would have just walked away. I did, I said quietly. For 11 years. But walking away only works when what's behind you isn't on fire. He nodded. Tomorrow, we file criminal charges. After that, restitution, property recovery, and assault. I exhaled slowly. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was justice. And justice, when done right, is louder than rage. I looked at the photo of my father on the mantel. Don't worry, Dad, I whispered. I'm fixing it. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Mark's voice, slurred, venomous. You think you can take everything from me? You think you can embarrass me in this town? I didn't respond, just listened. He continued. You're just like your old man, self-righteous, stubborn. You'll end up with nothing. Same as him, I smiled. Funny, I said. Last I checked, Dad built a house. You're just living in it. You're gonna regret this, Elena. Maybe. But you'll regret it first. Then I hung up, blocked his number, and for the first time in 11 years, I slept without fear. They say revenge doesn't heal you, but whoever said that never saw justice done. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse with my head high, wearing the same black suit I'd worn the day I got my first corporate promotion. Except this time, I wasn't closing a business deal. I was closing a chapter. Morrison walked beside me, carrying a folder thicker than my arm. Ready? He asked. I smiled. I've been ready since I was 19. Inside, the courtroom was small. Pale walls, buzzing lights, the faint smell of coffee and dust. Mark was already there, sitting beside his lawyer, face hard, jaw tight. Mom sat behind him, eyes swollen from crying. When the judge entered, the air shifted. Court is in session, she said. Morrison stood, voice steady. Your Honor, we're presenting evidence of property fraud, forged signatures, and physical assault committed by the defendant, Mr. Mark Holloway. The judge raised an eyebrow. You have documentation? Morrison handed her the file. Every signature, every forged loan, every photo of bruises and broken furniture. Mark's lawyer, a slick man in a cheap suit, tried to interrupt. These are exaggerated claims. My client. Your client forged a widow's name, Morrison cut in, then hit her daughter when she came to stop it. The room went still. Even the judge stopped flipping pages. Miss Cross, she said, looking at me, would you like to speak? I stood. Not shaking. Not this time. Yes, Your Honor. I met Mark's eyes. For 11 years, I stayed away because I thought peace meant distance, but peace doesn't come from silence, it comes from truth. I looked at my mother. She wanted to believe she was safe. He made her believe it, until he took everything my father built and called it his own. I held up the photo of the house. This isn't just wood and walls. It's history. My father's sweat, my mother's prayers, my childhood. And this man, I pointed to Mark, turned it into a pawn shop. He barked, "You ungrateful little—" The judge slammed her gavel. "One more word, Mr. Holloway, and I'll have you removed." Silence. Morrison stepped forward again. "Your Honor, we ask for an immediate injunction on all property and assets, full restitution, and protective orders for both Mrs. Lydia Holloway and Miss Cross." The judge flipped through the last few pages, then looked up. "Injunction granted. Property frozen. Restitution ordered. Criminal charges to proceed." Her gavel hit the wood. It sounded like thunder. Mark slumped in his seat. Mom covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. And me? I didn't cry. Not yet. Because this was just the start. 2 days later, the sheriff came to serve the eviction order. Mark was gone before they arrived. Vanished. Like the coward he was. Left behind unpaid bills, a broken recliner, and a house full of ghosts. Mom moved back into Grandma's for a while. The house sat empty for a week, hollow, silent. Then one morning, I unlocked the door again. The smell of stale beer and dust hit me first, but beneath it, I could still feel something. Alive. My father's presence. His fingerprints in the walls. His craftsmanship in every floorboard. It was time to rebuild. The contractors arrived the next day. James, the lead, was a kind man with sawdust in his beard and patience in his voice. "My granddad knew your father," he said he built things that lasted. "He did," I replied. "Let's make sure this does too." Room by room, we started undoing Mark's damage. The cigarette burns were sanded away, the floors refinished until they glowed again. The built-in shelves my father had crafted, destroyed by Mark, were rebuilt from old photos Grandma had saved. For the first time in years, the house smelled like pine and polish again, like home. Mom came by one afternoon carrying a box. "I found these," she said softly. "Inside were my baby photos, my father's medals, his West Point pin, the ones I thought were gone forever." She smiled faintly. "Mrs. Patterson next door. She kept them safe. Said she couldn't stand watching Rick sell them." I touched one medal, feeling its weight. "Dad would have been proud of her." Mom nodded. "And of you." I looked up. She wasn't the fragile woman I'd seen that first night. Something in her posture had changed. Stronger. Steadier. "Mom," I said, "you don't need to apologize anymore." "I do," she said. "Not for believing him, but for not believing you." We stood in silence for a moment. Two women in a house full of memories, reclaiming what was ours. Then she picked up a paintbrush. "Where do I start?" Weeks passed. The house transformed, not into what it was, but into something better. Something whole. The porch was repaired, the garden replanted. Neighbors started dropping by again, people who'd avoided the place while Mark was there. They brought food, stories, laughter. For the first time, the house wasn't just surviving, it was breathing. And neither of us had to walk on eggshells anymore. 3 months later, the final hearing came. Mark took a plea deal. 5 years in state prison. Fraud, forgery, assault, stolen valor. He didn't look at me once as they let him out. Didn't need to. He already knew. He'd lost. When the judge read the sentence, I didn't cheer. Didn't gloat. Because justice isn't about celebration. It's about peace. And for the first time in 11 years, I finally felt it. Back at the house, the sun was setting. The new floors gleamed. The rebuilt shelves stood tall, filled with family photos. I'd even framed Dad's Purple Heart above the mantel. Mom walked in carrying 2 mugs of tea. "You're leaving soon," she said quietly. I nodded. "New York's still home. But this," she said, looking around, "will always be your roots." She was right. I looked at the house one last time, at the sunlight touching the windows, at the old oak tree still standing guard outside. Dad built this place to last, I said softly. Mom smiled. He built us to last too. I hugged her tight. No words, just warmth. Then I whispered, "Never let anyone take this from you again." She nodded. Never again. That night I drove back toward the city. The town lights faded in the rearview mirror. The highway stretched ahead like a clean page. I thought about everything. The lies, the fear, the years I'd lost. And I realized something simple. It wasn't just about the house. It never was. It was about reclaiming something bigger. My strength, my voice, my truth. You can lose your home. You can lose your family. But if you don't lose yourself, you can rebuild everything. When the video ends, the story of Elena Cross. Remember this. Sometimes, the quietest people carry the sharpest justice. Sometimes, the ones who walk away come back stronger. And if you ever think you're too broken to fight, remember her. Because she didn't raise her voice. She raised the truth. And that was enough to bring a house back to life. My name is Elena Cross. And I came home to take back what was mine. If this story hit you, if you've ever fought back from betrayal, don't just scroll. Hit that like button. Share this story. Subscribe for more true stories of strength, justice, and survival. Because somewhere out there, another Elena is listening, waiting to remember her own power.